But the format of this is, as I said, the visual feedback part, and then the listener. The listeners for these events are all runtime listeners. And what I do is, for this example, I simply created a function called onKey. You'll also notice that I give a link to the reference, so you can go look at the key details. And then I break out all the important parts of the event. I extract the key name into a local variable key, the device into a local device, key code, is the control key down, etc., etc. And then I merely look at those details and I change the color of the indicators, or if the key is being pressed down, I change the key code and the key text so I know what key name came in. So the only thing that people might see here or they're not familiar with is, for example, if the control key is down, I say control set fill color, and then I call unpack G. And what that does is it takes this table that I stored in G and it separates it into 3 arguments and passes them as if I had typed 0, 0 instead of this. So this is the equivalent of 0, 1, 0 if I had typed that. So I guess that's probably shorter now that I think about it. But I like control. So here, if I had decided that green was not the color I wanted, I could just change the key color up here and then I'd be done. So I unpack G and I change the color. If it's not down, then I set it back to white. And you'll notice that I put these all on one line, which is kind of a little weird for some people, but I wanted the code to be tight so people could read through it quickly. And that's it. Mouse, same structure. More details, all broken out and set. So people can easily crawl through this code and run it, and they'll be in good shape to start discovering key inputs and mouse inputs.
Very nice.
So before I close my screen, is there any question you want to ask about the demo? Because I'm going to go to my camera.
I don't think so. Anybody else have a...
Okay. So we're 5 minutes over, but I want to close this with a question and a statement, I guess. Is as I said earlier, you have to make your game development decisions based on the inputs you've got available to you and the outputs you've got available. So the outputs are unlimited. We've got desktop. We can do all kinds of crazy stuff. We can go way overboard with particles and objects, and way more than we could ever do with the iOS or Android devices because they're limited processing power. But we do have some limits on inputs that we can assume for this show, for our listeners, that they all have. They all have a keyboard, and they all have at least a left mouse button, that is. So I would like to assume that that's our basis and select a game based on those criteria and what we already got from our last game that can be modified and co-opted into a new game. So I'm going to propose now our choices. I've said some things, but I realized when I did today's example, we've got more choices. And they're all very popular. Things that we can easily make by modifying our previous game and adding keyboard and mouse inputs are a tower defense game, a platformer, a standard platformer that allows you to jump on platforms, jump through platforms, think Mario's old school style. We can easily make a platformer that has level-to-level doors and all the other things that the other platformer had, but then you'll be able to navigate from one scene back to another scene, so it's like a big world instead of just a unidirectional, more like Mario, original Mario. And even the original Mario actually had doors that went between world segments, so that's not exactly a perfect factual statement. We can also do top-down shooters, like bullet hells, things like that. We could definitely do that, although I think that's more suitable for a controller input, so I kind of want to say no. Keyboard control of those is not so good, and a mouse it's doable, but it's not quite as natural to me as a device handheld controller. And then a racing game, top-down racing game. But again, I kind of think that's more of a controller. So what do you guys on the panel think would be the most fun to do out of tower defense, Mario platform, more complex Mario platformer, top-down shooter, or racing?
Top-down
Well,
shooter.
in my humble opinion, go ahead. Go ahead, Sir Jacob.
Say again, Brian?
In my opinion, I think a platformer gives itself to the controller a little bit more easily than, say, a tower defense type style game.
Okay, so that's wait for a controller on platformer?
I
Okay.
think go.
For keyboard and mouse, then, what game would we do? Say yours again. Okay, you guys, I got confused there. Sergey, you said
I said top-down shooter.
top-down
You can
shooter.
u-
We got
you can
one
use
vote for
mouse
top-down
to-
shooter.
You can use mouse to point to somebody. You can scroll the wheel to change weapons. Keyboard to move, and I don't know, some special actions perform.
I'm okay. I'm down with that. But Brian, what's your vote here? Keyboard and mouse input.
Oh, that's tough. I've always loved tower defense style games, but the top-down shooter gives itself very well to the mouse keyboard environment.
Okay. Now I'm not going to give Charles a vote, even though it's his hangout. No, Charles, give us your vote, man.
You know, my first thought was the top-down shooter.
Okay, I'm going to agree. Here's my thought. I think I'm going to go out on a limb here. Actually, for me, developing the top-down shooter first would be easier to segue people into using the mouse and the keyboard. However, there's a negative side here that you guys didn't really think about, which is it's not really suitable for the prior code that I already have in place from the last game. I can't immediately see a way to use that to implement this or edit this. Now, I still think let's do a top-down shooter, basic top-down shooter, using the mouse to aim, keyboard to move, and maybe add some additional. Once we've done that and gotten people kind of familiar with the inputs, let's go and do a tower defense game. Because I can definitely co-opt the code from Monsters Need Coins to make a tower defense and the editor and the whole thing right away.
And let's the top-down shooter level editor from tiled, like import levels from tiled engine.
Okay, well, let's
Yes,
approach it
definitely.
this way. Let me do. And usually, the way I'll approach a new game is no editor to start, and then figure out how an editor can be used to implement levels. So instead of doing it upside down, because for me, without knowing what my interaction mechanics are exactly, it's hard for me to say how should I deal with the inputs from a editor. So let's leave that. I would like to leave that tabled for a future episode of that game. It's definitely a good idea, but not sure how that'll be done at this point. And what was the editor again? Tile?
Tiled. I have the code
T-I-L-E-D.
to import, to parse the files. It's very easy. I can send you.
Okay.
Are you using
please.
Dusk, or have you made your own?
My own.
Okay.
Yeah, please do email me about that, and I'll put that in my notes that I keep for doing these hangouts.
Yeah.
And
And
you see on the forums.
Go
You
ahead.
see on the forums quite a bit of discussion of using Dusk with tiled, and so it's become a real popular format.
Yeah, I've been a little busy lately. My queue on things to answer in the forums have gotten way behind. So,
Right.
but I did see
And
the
it's just
discussion. It was a
And
discussion.
I'm aware of
about
it because
I
many
just
of my
didn't grok
students
it
are
all.
using Dusk. So it's become very popular, and a lot of discussion in the forums.
It is. Dusk is also a good option.
Yeah.
By Caleb Place,
But if Storage is kind of a better tool for parsing and using map systems, then I'm all for that as well. Especially if he's going to open source it like Dusk.
All right, guys. I think that's it. I think we've.
All right. So next week we will discuss creating a top-down shooter using a mouse and keyboard inputs.
I'm only going to say one thing though. It's going to have zombies. It's got to have zombies.
Gotta have them. Yeah. Oh, of course. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this because I think we've done a platformer game in the past, sort of just to look at the mechanics. Of course, it wasn't a desktop, but I think once people understand the way that the inputs work, then they could probably go back and map that to a platformer on their own. Tower defense, again, we've always talked about this as one of those things when you look at something, you go, how did they do that? So that would be a good question to answer. And if we can definitely take the previous game and morph that'll be an interesting conversation as well. How to take something that was developed for mobile, morph it into a desktop, and then kind of change genres almost into a desktop tower defense.
Monsters Need Coins. You made me think of this. Is totally mappable to a controller, joystick, whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it wouldn't be. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So that'll be a fun. But yeah, doing the top-down shooter is something we haven't done yet, and it too is one of those things when you see it, you're kind of like, how did they do that? So we'll kind of answer a bunch of questions all at one time, I think. So
this will be an exploration for me a little bit. I know the basics of it, but
awesome. All right, well, good deal. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll be back here next Monday when we pick up where we left off. And until then, have a great week and happy coding.
Auf Wiedersehen.